Hi, I'm Beth Townsend and welcome to Fundamental Fondant Techniques, Elegance and Style. Today I'm going to teach you how to get some really beautiful edges on your square and round cakes, how to add some really elegant texture, and some really cool techniques that are going to bring a lot of style to your cakes. And they're really versatile. You can use them in many different ways. So let's get started. So to get started, I want to tell you that I actually bake and then freeze my cakes. So these cakes are, they're almost thawed out. They're still very chilled. So it just makes them a lot easier for them to work on. They're a lot firmer. If I were to just start working on these when they're right out of the oven or even room temperature, they crumble real easily. So right now they're pretty cool. And so that's my 2 square cakes. And then I have some really thick buttercream here. I want to show you. The buttercream that I use is super thick. I add a lot of powdered sugar to it so that it's really firm. You can see it just kind of hangs there. And this is really, really important when you're making cakes, filling them, stacking them, the whole thing, because if it's a runny buttercream or if it's a runny filling, then it just kind of must ooze out the side. So let's get started. I have a little bit of buttercream down here on my wax-covered cake board, and I have my cake here. I'm just going to put it right on top. And then as you can see, it has kind of a dome to it. When you bake cakes, they just naturally form a dome on top. So we're just going to level that off. So we're going to carefully cut the top of our cake. And this is not a serrated knife. It's a nice flat knife. And this is what I prefer to use. It's just one of the tools that we'll be using today. I have just an array of knives, a little square here just to help us keep our sides level, and a bench scraper, and our ganache and our buttercream, the cakes of course. So for this lesson, that's what we'll need, and I'll get to some other ones later, but the entire list will be on the website. So I'm just going to add some buttercream here to the top. If you wanted to add a filling to the cake, you could, like a lemon curd or raspberry or something, but you just want to add a nice thick buttercream to the outside, a nice thick dam like this, and then you would fill it full of your runnier filling, but you need that dam on the outside to keep it all from escaping out. So it's really up to you how thick you want to put your filling in the middle. I like kind of a medium coat. Some people like to put the ratio to the buttercream in the middle the same as the cake, so there's the same ratio of everything, but I love cake so much I almost don't like the buttercream, so I don't put a whole lot. So I'm just going to kind of level this out. The key to everything is just trying to keep everything level. So you can't have a ton of buttercream on one side and not on the other, because then the cake will come out unlevel. So we're going to let it just go right over the sides. It's not a big deal. And I'm going to level the top of this cake too. You don't have to be too exact, but you just want to take the even coat off the top. And then I'm going to put the raw edge down onto our buttercream here. And I'm just going to try to make sure it's placed evenly with the one beneath. And I'm going to gently push down on it. And because our cakes are a little bit firm, it's not going to hurt anything. If this cake was room temperature, you'd run the risk of it breaking. But we're just going to gently push down just to push out any air bubbles, make sure that everything is adhered together. Okay. So now I'm going to take some of this extra buttercream out from the outside. We don't want too much in there, but I'm not just wiping it off, I'm also pushing it in. That way it fills any gaps or air bubbles that are in there. So I'm applying gentle pressure and just pushing it right back into the cake and taking off the extra too, just sliding it right off. You want your spatula always straight up and down, and then at a slight little bit of an angle, just so it kind of scoops some icing off with you. But you don't want to hold it like this or like this, because your icing will be bulged out to a weird angle. So just kind of push it all in there, and you'll get the groove and the hang of this and be able to go pretty fast once you got the hang of it. So we have it all pushed in there. So cakes naturally, when you bake them, they kind of have a weird like warped edge to them. As you can see, I have my two raw edges together, and it's almost like they go out and then back in like this. So what I like to do is I like to take a serrated knife at this point. The flat knife works better for leveling the top, and it's a little less dangerous for your hands, but the serrated knife works better for the sides. So I'm just going to pick a side, and I'm going to trim off just a little bit, like a 1/4 inch. But really, you can make this cake as big or small as you want. but I want to stay a little true to our size here. So I'm going to cut off about 1/4 inch, and I'm going to hold my knife completely up and down, not to the side or like this, unless you're doing a topsy-turvy wonky cake and that's what you want. And you're going to have to keep it straight up and down like this. Just be real careful with your fingers. Just go slow, because you can always take more cake off, but you can't put more cake on. And having your cake a little bit firm really helps. So I'm just going to take a couple seconds to kind of refine this edge here. And this is where this little level works great. You can hold it up against the cake and just see if there's a little bit that is unsquare. So you just check all the way around, especially with these square cakes. It's real hard to keep these guys perfectly square. So it helps a lot too to just start at the top fragile corner and then kind of ease your way down so you don't rip the cake. If you've spent too much time fussing with it, your cake starts to get thawed out too much. You can put it right back in the freezer or the fridge and let it firm back up. If you do rip a corner, then you can always fix it with the ganache. So I'm just going to carefully go all the way around. You can save all your scraps for cake pops or midnight snack, or you can actually use them. I save my cake scraps and I put them in the food processor and I turn them into really fine crumbs, and they work great for cake dirt. So I'm just going to check around my cake here see how square it is. It doesn't have to be absolutely perfect at this point because we can always fake some edges out with the ganache. And even the fondant if you have to. Cake's really forgiving, so there's no crying in cake. See, I actually ripped this little corner, and we're not going to worry about it. We're just going to fix it with ganache. Okay, so now I'm going to eyeball the top just to make sure that's level too. If you don't trust eyeballing it, then you can use a little torpedo level to really get that really square. So I'm just going to take a little bit off the top here. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with this. It's very square, and what I'm actually going to do now is I'm going to cover it in ganache. I know we discussed ganache before and how to make it, and I'm sure you guys are all pros by now. But just in case you're new, the ganache recipe is up, and it is an absolute essential, I think, to all cakes. To stacked cakes, sculpted cakes, every cake that you do, I feel like it should have ganache because it's just another piece of the puzzle to make it really stable. Adding ganache to the outside of the cake is like coating it in a giant candy bar where you can actually touch it and it's not going to dent. It's going to hold its shape. This inner filling right here won't bubble out into the ganache. So it's really, really stable. So my ganache is pretty thick. It's almost like a little bit runnier version of peanut butter. So it makes it really good for spreading. And I'm just going to coat the outside of the cake. I'm doing the same thing we did with the buttercream. I'm moving it, but I'm also applying pressure and kind of scrubbing it into the cake almost because I really want it to be adhered and strong. So I'm putting a pretty good coat on here. You can see it's not thin, it's not thick. It's kind of a medium coat. So just be really careful with your corners when you're putting the ganache on or frosting. Just kind of put a big pile of it up against the corner and let it roll over to the other side and then gently coax it over. That way you don't rip the corners. The corners are the thing you really have to pay most attention to. So I just put a big glob on the top and I just kind of flatten it out, let it roll over the sides. You just chase it around the sides. It's real easy once you get the hang of it. If you wanted to achieve a more topsy-turvy look, then with the knife and your spatula, everything, you just kind of hold it at an angle. You just cut the cake at an angle, everything at an angle again. It's That's a real easy look to achieve also. So now I'm just going to take the top bits of ganache here. The ganache, as it's on this cake, is getting firmer and firmer because the cake's cold and the chocolate's seizing up. So it makes it even easier to work with. So I'm just kind of gently, barely dragging my spatula across this top edge, just to kind of cut that chocolate and level it with the top of the cake. I'm just wiping the excess off as I go, just so I don't leave bits of it behind. We can clean it up after the ganache sets, so if it's seizing up on you too much and you feel like you're having a hard time moving it around, just go ahead and put it in the fridge and let it be. And then once the chocolate's completely firm, then I'll show you how to use a knife and really clean up and make it really square. We're just trying to do the best possible right now while the ganache is still soft. When you're working with fondant, you want to always try to make sure that whatever's underneath the fondant is as clean and smooth as possible, because the fondant will pick up any details that are imperfections on your cake. So I'm just going to let this be now. I'm going to let it go back into the fridge and get firm, and I'm going to show you how to really clean this up and make it nice and square. Now that our cake has been cooled in the fridge, you can actually put it in the freezer if you're in a hurry. You can see it's nice and firm. I can actually touch it and thump on it, and it's really firm, which is perfect. This is exactly what we want for our ganache, nice and stable for the cake. So what I have here is I have some really hot water and some utensils here that I'm going to use. I have a little spatula and a bigger one, and I actually have a knife here, a nice flat one. So what we're going to do with this is we're going to use it to shape this ganache and really level it out. So because we have it in the hot water, the tools are a little bit warm, which helps with the ganache. So I'm just going to use it to kind of scrape along the top and the sides to knock off any high points and to really square up the edge of the cake. So just bounce back and forth between whatever tools work for you. You can actually shave off with the knife, do big cuts, little cuts, just go around. What I like to do is I like to bounce back and forth between a bunch of different areas, the sides and the top. That way I don't spend too much time in the cake thawing. I can kind of just spend some time shaving it. You can actually use the warmth of your hands also. Just get your hands a little bit wet to kind of blend out seams, like little ridges where the chocolate is unlevel. Just try to get it as level as you can. If you make a mistake and you chop off too much, you can always just add more ganache to it and re-chill it and then start back over again. But this is just a good way to get it nice and perfect. If you're doing a finish that has a lot of texture, like the lace finish I'm going to show you later, or even the ruffles or the quilting, then you don't have to spend too much time fussing with your cake to make it perfect. This is just if it's maybe a wedding cake and there's not a lot of decorations. But just keep dipping it back into your hot water so that you can just get it nice and warm. Just keep going all the way around your cake. Check all your edges. It's real easy. Just shave it off. And also, if the edges are really sharp, just wet your fingers and just kind of knock them down a little bit. Use the palm of your hand, your fingers. Just really helps smooth it out, especially the sides. Your hands are your best tools. Just make sure they're really clean. When you're working with cake, just always have clean hands. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with this. The next step we're going to do is we're going to clean up our cake board here. Get some of the shavings off there. Just because we're going to put a coat of buttercream on now. And we don't want these cake chunks and chocolate chunks getting into the icing. If you have a lot of moisture still on your cake where the water's running off it, go ahead and dry it up with a paper towel. You don't want the buttercream to get too watery on there. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the same nice thick sturdy buttercream, and I'm just going to put a big dollop of it on top, and I'm going to push it on the sides exact same way we did the ganache. We're not going to put too much on, not too thick, not too thin, somewhere in the middle, happy medium. So I'd like to put a big dollop on the top and then push it down to the sides. Let's have a nice bit of it here on the sides. And then just like before, always being real careful of our corners, because especially now at this point, it's really crucial. If we break a corner, we're gonna have a problem. So I'm just gonna go all the way around, just kind of getting the majority of it on there. I'm not gonna fuss with it too much yet. I just wanna get a quick coat on. All the way around. If you have too much on there, just scoop some off and put it back. But I think it's better to start with a ton of it on there and then have to take some off than it is to try to patch it up with more. Okay, so now I'm really pushing it against the side of the cake really firmly, straight up and down. So I want to make sure it's super adhered. We don't want for there to be any of the ganache showing through. A little bit of shadow is fine, but we don't want, if we're covering the cake in white, we don't want to see any of that shadow underneath. So I'm just going to go all the way around like we did with the ganache and just try to keep it as level as possible. Sometimes you get a little chunk of chocolate or something, a little rogue piece that wants to float around and be in the buttercream. Just scoop it out. Don't try to smooth it out. Just pick it right out and then go over the top with the buttercream. I'm just grazing right over the top. I'm not really putting much pressure. I'm just getting close enough to catch that lip and drag it forward. And you always want to scrape the excess off onto a bowl. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with this. I think it's going to work just fine for what we're doing. And I'm going to clean up my area and trim up my cake board with a pair of scissors just real tight to the edge. And then we'll be right back to start the fondant. So we're back now and ready to roll fondant. I cleaned up my work area, which is really, really important. You have to make sure every crumb and every bit of chocolate is picked up off your countertop, because if not, this fondant's like a magnet and it picks up all the little dirty stuff. So really clean work area. And I just spent some time kneading my fondant. And it's really, really important to knead your fondant because that's what makes it elasticy and kind of go over the cake easy. If you just took it right out of the bucket and rolled it out and went to use it, it'd really want to crack on you and break. So you want to knead it like you do pie dough, and then just get it nice and soft. So I have probably about 2.5 to 3 pounds here, maybe even a little more. And the reason why I have so much, I know this looks almost the same size as our cake, but I just like to have a lot of extra when I'm rolling out. Because really, if you're new to fondant rolling, then you want to have a nice big area of fondant to put onto your cake. The bigger it is, the easier it is to cover. If you had measured out just enough to cover this cake, you'd have to really fight with these sides to get them smooth and all the pleats out. So I really recommend rolling it out much bigger than you need. So, and I'm kind of short, so I usually step on a stool when I roll out. It gives you leverage. Rolling out fondant is kind of a job. It gives you a good workout. So if you step on a stool or have a little something to give you leverage, that really helps. So I have my fondant here just kind of pressed into a general shape of what we want. I like to just shape it with my hands first. And then I'm going to put some powdered sugar down on my workspace here. So I just have a sifter. I'm just going to put a thin kind of coat of powdered sugar down. It's definitely better to have more powdered sugar than not enough, because you don't want it to stick. So I put it down on my surface and on the back of my fondant. I'm just going to flip it over onto my workspace. And then I'm going to use my rolling pin. Another trick for good fondant rolling is a nice heavy rolling pin here. This one's marble, so it really does a lot of the work for me because it's really, really heavy. So if you have any little specks of chocolate or cake or anything that show up on your fondant, then just pick it right off. So what I like to do is I like to start at the middle and work my way out. Try to be conscious of how thick you are rolling it all the way around. You don't want to have like one area really thin and then this side really thick and try to put it on the cake. It's going to cause a trouble for you. So I can see I have an air bubble forming right here. You can see when I push on it, it kind of moves around. So this is pretty common, especially where I am down in South Florida. We get air bubbles all the time because of humidity. So you just take a pin and just kind of poke it sideways and then just smooth it out with your finger and it gets rid of it. I have one here. Just keep on rolling. And I'm going to leave some of these air bubbles because I want to show you how to fix them when it's on the cake. So I'm going to show you how to fix it when that happens. So I'm just rolling this out a little less than 1/4 inch thick. If you're new to fondant, then roll it really thick. The thicker, the better it is for getting it onto the cake and for keeping it from tearing. Okay, so this is more than enough than we need for this cake, but I want to show you how easy it is to get onto the cake when it's bigger rather than smaller. So I'm going to pick up my cake here. The buttercream that we put on here is a crusting buttercream, so we need to re-wet it so the fondant sticks. So I'm just using a spray bottle here with clean water, and I just put a light coat all the way around just to help the fondant stick. And I'm going to pick up my fondant like this. Never like this because it'll leave little fingerprints. So just kind of slide your arms underneath, flat like this, and then I'm going to transfer it right onto the cake. Just real carefully, just inch it underneath, and then put it right on top. And I'm going to start out, it's a messy job. I'm going to start out with my fondant smoothers here, and I'm going to do the top first like this. Just smoothing it all the way down so there's no air bubbles. Okay, and I like to start with the corners first. The corners are the most crucial part on a square cake because they want to rip. So I'm actually going to cup the fondant with my hands like this and do the corners first. So just gently cupping the corners. Don't worry about the air bubbles right now or if there's any rips. If the rips are just minor, they're not too bad, then we can fix them. I'll show you how to fix them. The corners are the most important part. They're the hardest part to keep smooth, so really focus on those corners first. And really, if you mess up, you just lift it right off, re-knead it, and roll it out again. So how we use these fondant smoothers is you can either hold them up and down like this and trail around the cake, or you can hold them on their side like this and just push them right up against the cake. Nice, firm, even pressure. I'm just going up and down, back and forth, really making sure that the fondant is adhered good to the buttercream. And because that buttercream is nice and squishy underneath the fondant, you can really push it into any holes that you have, or it really takes shape good with these. So I'm going all the way around the cake. Okay, so now we're going to take our smoothers and we're just going to bring them together to help square these corners back up. So I'm pushing up with this one and over with this one. We're going to try to manipulate that buttercream back into a sharp corner. These square cakes really are some of the hardest to do, I think, because the angles have to be so precise, otherwise they're really noticeable. I'm just going to get rid of some of this bulk here. So I'm just trimming up really tight to the cake. We can save this excess and re-roll it and use it again. You just want to re-knead it and put it in plastic. So I have an air bubble here in this corner that I've been chasing out now for a little while. So I want to show you how I fix these ones that are in the corners. So I just use my knife here and I gently go in between the fondant and the buttercream, just kind of lift up a little bit and then chase it out and push it back down. Just to get rid of that air bubble. So I've spent a lot of time here smoothing out this cake. Just paying as much attention as I can to any air bubbles and seams. I left some imperfections so I can show you how to fix them. So I'm going to transfer this to my turntable and clean up a little bit and then show you how to do that. So now that I have my cake up on the turntable, I can really study it and see where my flaws are. Today's a really humid day, so today's a good day for flaws. So I want to show you how to fix air bubbles first. So I can see I have a nice air bubble here, And you really have to get the air bubbles fixed while the fondant is still movable, otherwise it just continue to grow and grow and grow. And then you have a giant, huge bubble on the side of your cake. So what I like to do is I use a little needle and I just plug it in sideways along the fondant. And what I'm looking for is to go between the fondant and the buttercream. So I just go right in and then chase that air bubble out. So I just use my finger to just kind of push the air bubble through my little hole I made in the fondant and then smooth it back out. Don't worry about the hole because I'm going to show you how to fix it. So I'm going to keep looking for any more air bubbles. Just keep looking for them, chasing them out. Now's the time to do it. So any uneven areas or rips or my elephant skin have going, the bubbles, all that can be fixed with buttercream. The same buttercream that we've been using works really good. So I'm just going to put a little bit on my cake where I have my holes. I'll start with those. So just put a little bit on there, and then I have hot water here again. Hot water helps the buttercream kind of dissolve and move around. So I have a clean paintbrush, not a craft brush that you use for paints, just one specifically for cake. And I'm going to get it a little bit wet. You don't want it sopping wet, just kind of wet enough so you can move the icing around. And then you just brush back and forth, kind of a crisscross motion. So you can kind of feather out that buttercream and hide your mistake. Just keep going. Alright, so now I'm going to fix my elephant skin that I have here in my corners. You can see how it's kind of wrinkled up. That's pretty normal for down here. It's really humid. And the more you work the fondant, the more elephant skin you tend to get. So I'm just gonna do the same thing. Put a bunch of buttercream on there and use my really hot water and just kind of smooth it out. It's kind of like spackling or caulking for cake. I use this a lot when I do my sculpted cakes because it's really hard to get one giant piece around, let's say, an alligator or a teddy bear. So you have to do it in pieces, so you always have seams. So I end up having to use this technique all the time to fix my seams. So that's how you fix problems on fondant. And that's not just for square cakes, that's for all cakes and sculpted cakes. It's a good technique to learn, especially even if you roll out fondant perfect every time, which usually we do. You get the hang of it and it rolls out really well. But sometimes on delivery things happen, and sometimes even at venues, for some reason people like to poke cakes. They always say, oh, that's a real cake, and then they put their finger in it. So this is a good way for you to fix any problems that happen down the road. So I've spent some time now cleaning up all my little errors on the cake. I know it seems like a lot of work to fix all these little problems, but it makes a difference in the end. Right now it's kind of shiny and uneven looking, but as it dries it'll all matte back out and it'll look just like the fondant seamless. So that's a square cake, and I want to show you how to do round cake, and it's actually a whole lot easier than a square cake. You're going to love it. We'll be right back with that.